The end of the year is approaching, it's getting dark outside, and for some people, darkness equals loneliness. And as soon as you have these issues, you might now think, is this episode about psychological issues, mental health? Sort of. Of course, we can't cover the whole topic just in one session. We're talking about a difficult topic when leaders become addicted. Talking about addiction is challenging for many, if not for everyone, because addictions still have a huge stigma. Often people say you're weak, it's your fault, you should have seen that. Just change your behavior, just stop doing X, Y, Z. XYZ. Very simple advice is all over the internet of people, of course, who never faced any addictions, but who know it all how to handle it way better. No one likes to talk about addictions. When we look into Statista, we find a 50% raise in stress for leaders. And by the way, it doesn't only apply for leaders, it's the same for people who work in any position in free enterprise, public service, or anywhere else. Mental health issues are becoming increasingly present, not only during last years, but the reaction to that quite frequently is an addiction or an addiction-like behavior. What should we do when you suddenly see, probably one of my colleagues is not doing too well, and it shows? Might not be an addiction, but could be. Today, we talk about the aspect of addictions. And the reason why I talk about this is because multiple emails arrived in my inbox with one case which was particularly shocking. But first, I can give you two examples from my real world practice. So, case number one is a large law firm, a law firm anyone here would know, but we of course guarantee anonymity with anything. You know, in large law firms, they work long hours. And one partner specifically worked very long hours, keeping the trainees with him, talking and explaining cases or just talking. And as he said, well, let's have a drink. And he always had a drink in the office and then probably a bourbon or a whiskey or maybe a bottle of whiskey, as that partner did. And I mean every single night of the week. And of course, trainees who were eager to have a career didn't say anything. And the only moment when the topic suddenly popped up was when one trainee said, this is having such an impact on my private life. I'm not doing this anymore, especially as we're not learning anything here. We're just here to entertain the partner who's obviously doing nothing else than drinking, which clearly is an issue. And now you wonder, how did the case end? I'll tell you in a minute. But first, we get to case number two, because with case number one, you could say, hey, it's a large law firm, high pressure is part of the game. And often people say, oh, you get great salaries there, as if your health is included in the salary. It's clearly not. Case number two is in a production area where someone's operating forklifts. So that means heavy machinery and driving around at reasonably high speed on different surfaces. And that person was seen drinking, not once, but twice. And then frequently, where people saw, okay, every single time he just takes his bottle of coffee that he brings from home, and then he always just wanders off for no particular reason. And people often wonder, what is he actually doing? So he wanders off, and then someone saw the thermos jug, the thermos flask, thermos jug, was suddenly filled with a bit of vodka and a bit more and a bit more. So clearly drinking while being on the job, which is, of course, hugely problematic. They addressed it, and nothing happened. I will tell you what the reaction was in a minute. And an accident followed. And the third case, which is the one that I received via email, where someone was drunk, caused an accident. Fortunately, no personal injuries, but with clearly a 7-digit amount of damage in machinery, customers lost, and penalties to be paid for late delivery due to the unavailability of machinery. The interesting aspect, and I don't like to use the word interesting here, it's better to say the hugely problematic aspect was that in all of these cases, the leaders were informed. Leaders were informed, saying there is an issue with a partner staying late at night drinking. There is an issue with someone operating forklifts, drinking constantly. There is an issue with someone operating heavy machinery here, drinking on the job. And leaders said, well, you know, it's private. You're just assuming he's doing the job well, and I think that we shouldn't interact with it. And they didn't. Nothing happened until it completely escalated, and then the blame was given to the employees. Leaders said, how can it get that far that no one says anything? At the law firm, they told employees, up to the secretary, telling, you know what happened, why didn't anyone tell us? Which, by the way, is a straightforward lie, people told. And then with the forklift case, people said, why didn't anyone tell us? And they said, we told you. And they said, oh, we don't remember. Maybe you weren't clear enough. So blaming the employee is absurd. By the way, in the third case with the heavy machinery and the massive 7-digit damage, exactly the same. Telling people, oh, we're a community here. Why did never anyone say anything? It's absurd. So now we have to talk about how can we do better. And there are 3 steps you have to put into practice. Number 1 is prevention. And prevention is difficult in this one because you cannot just leave a leaflet somewhere and then say, take it from here. So people need to know something which has foundation in science, but also is very relevant to their real world environment. So when it's very scientific, but not practical, people will say, I didn't understand what they were talking about. When it's very practical, but not scientific, people might just give them some sort of anecdotal advice. So people say, well, it's quite different here, so I'm not sure if it applies. So you need someone who is scientifically qualified, but also has the practical experience with it. These facts have to include what kind of behavior do I see? Are there any signs? Are there any hints? What do I do if someone notifies me of something going wrong? People need to know what is the act that happens? What is something that could happen to me by tomorrow? Either receiving the information or seeing the information about someone drinking on the job, just to take that example, not even talking about drugs or other substances. How do I act with that? Because then we come to phase number 2, and that is how to deal with it. So first, you need to have, and that is you must have help available, and you must have help available before it happens for the very first time. Because I often see that people say, oh, how could this happen? And then no department has anything ready. So you need to know who can help you. Hospitals, doctors, therapists, phone numbers, website, material to read to take home. All of this must be there before you need it. And of course, you always must be able to act as someone who helps. You're probably not an expert on the matter, but you're an expert on pointing to someone who's an expert on the matter, and that is your job as an organization. There are 3 main aspects how this offer needs to be designed. Aspect number 1, it always has to be available 24/7. Aspect number 2, there always is an option for anonymity so that people can get access to this without needing to provide personal data. And aspect number 3, the whole offer does not focus on working time or money. When you say we have an offer available, but please clock out before you take it, take a break before you address it, and do it in your spare time. Health is not something on or off work. And I know this might sound challenging for certain industries, but you need to take care of your employees' health if you like it or not. It's not a question of opinion. It is a question of moral, ethics, and reasonable behavior as a leader. Step 3 then is the aftercare. You, for example, know that there should be something like health management in your organization. You hopefully have it in place. You need to offer help instead of punishment. Of course, it has consequence when someone drinks on the job. You clearly have to take the person off the job. However, if you only say, we fire you, off you go, you just move the problem to somewhere else. Because most likely these people say, I need to pay my rent, I need to get money in, often to finance the addiction. They just go somewhere else. And after that, after they went somewhere else, it means that they just moved their addiction to a different scenario, became maybe a bit pseudo clever on how to hide it, and the whole issue is still there, just with someone else in your industry or any other industry. You need to help instead of punish. The core message always has to be health comes first. And I give you a very positive example of a company in northern Germany. An accident happens, someone drove with a small truck into another car. Fortunately, only material damage, no personal damage, and it comes out when the police arrives, the driver was drunk. Comes out, problem, not drunk for the first time. And the owner of that company immediately says there's no way to fire him because it doesn't help anyone. So the owner pays the damage because, of course, first the insurance pays, but then the insurance claims it back from you. So the owner pays that damage, talks to the employee, offers the employee help. There's a whole reintegration program, and still that person, without being an alcoholic today, still works in that company. That is how you handle it. And it's an industry, because when you're now thinking, oh, this might be an industry with huge profit margins. No, it's a retail-focused sales product, which is in the fashion area with very, very tiny margins. So you see, it's relying on the will of a leader to help or not. The question now is, how do you deal with it? Are you still sitting there and say, well, we We can't know, and I don't want to be the person that coaches myself into the private life of someone, which of course you're not allowed to, especially when they do not agree. However, often it's not the problem that you can't coach yourself into someone's private life, which is never the goal. You never offered something. You always focused on, oh, please be available for work, and as long as you work, I don't care about anything else. The question is, do you help or do you just use people? And that's your call now. And of course, there's more about this, and it's a very delicate and difficult topic, as you know. Feel free to contact me anytime. Full anonymity is always guaranteed. nb@nb-networks.com. You find the email address in the show notes of this podcast. You also, in the show notes of this podcast, find the LinkedIn where you can connect me, and then we can start chatting from there. So feel free to network or contact me about anything with this topic or any other topic you like to talk about. When you need something very specific, training, speaking, coaching, happy to discuss that as well, but we can also just chat about your topics. The second step, which I always recommend, is register for the leadership letter, because we have live sessions. We just had one last week. Live sessions means you can talk about anything you like. When you go to expert.nb-networks.com, just put your email address in there, and then you receive only one email per week every Wednesday morning. It's 100% content at free guarantee. And that email is access to an email which you get where you can access everything I published in writing on the audio channel as the podcast here. And of course, there's access to the live sessions that we have. So feel free to do that as well. And the last step, and that's the third step I always recommend, is apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the positive change that you actually want to see in your organization. The time is getting darker and the days are getting shorter, a bit longer, quite soon. However, it is scientifically proven, and that's a reason why, for example, in companies like Norway or Sweden, where there's less sunlight and immediately the suicide rate jumps up, alcohol is very expensive and highly taxed. It is very important that in these days you offer people help. Some people might face an end of the year which is not pleasant, especially the end of the year time reminds some people of that they are lonely, that they have no social contacts, and suddenly the behavior either is still there, becomes stronger, or starts to begin where behavior becomes hugely problematic. It is our job to keep people in the social circle. It is our job to help people wherever we can. It is our job to make an organization successful beyond the balance sheet. I wish you all the best doing so. And for the end of this week, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.